how somebody could do something so horrific, not only to another human being, but to their own child.
A chilling 911 call led officers to a Michigan home where 15-year-old Timothy Ferguson was found. He was starved, bruised, and broken. The suspects? His own mother, Shanda Vander Ark, and brother, Paul Ferguson.
We went through the phones, okay? And we're beginning to go through the phones, and there's a lot of evidence in the phones, and I know that you're kind of aware of communication between yourself and your mother.
Yes.
And those sort of things. And that's kind of what I want to talk to you about.
Yeah.
But, I mean, certainly, those are very serious things that you guys are talking about.
Yeah.
And, I mean, from what I saw, it sounds like you're compassionate and that you cared about him, and you sent some pictures that were like, he's looking too skinny, and we need to feed him. And, you know, there's sometimes you get frustrated, but at the end of the day, you kept coming back to caring. But the end result of that, he passed away, right? And he passed away from not eating food.
When officers found Timothy, the sight was beyond haunting. At just 69 pounds, the 15-year-old weighed as much as a healthy 6-year-old, his body temperature plummeting into hypothermic territory. But the numbers only told a part of the horror. There was more to uncover.
And like trying to get to the truth of what really happened with your brother, because he deserves that. I mean, there's clearly a lot of messages about stuff that you guys are doing with him, about what he's eating, about restricting his food. How did that all work? Like, what was he allowed to eat?
We made sure that it was still something that gave him enough calories and everything. It was rice or bread, and like I said last week, he got pizza.
Okay. What were they in place for, like, in the first place?
Sneaking food over and over and over. Okay. We've tried everything. We were nice. We tried different consequences, but he just couldn't ever listen.
According to Paul, Timothy was punished for stealing food. However, during investigation, officers uncovered child locks on cabinets and refrigerators. Food wasn't just limited, it was forbidden. But Paul's explanation said otherwise.
What type of disorders does he have that you're aware of?
I know he has ADHD. I believe he has sensory processing.
Okay.
I was never there for any sort of autism spectrum test, but from what I've seen, I know that probably was a thing. I also know he was motor and speech impaired. He couldn't run right and talk right. And I think when he was younger, he had to have a surgery on his ears to have tubes put in because he has heightened hearing that was very loud noises could be painful.
Okay. So too much.
Yeah.
Paul decided to take the easy way out, to blame it all on the victim. The same victim whose frail body bore silent screams, deep bruises, oozing open sores, skin deteriorating from filth. But how did he even end up like this?
So Timothy comes up here. What's life like immediately when he gets up here?
The first couple of weeks were good. He didn't misbehave, but then after that, it just reverted back to what he was doing before.
Okay.
The destructiveness and everything.
Let's explain that.
It was very dangerous. He would pull the outlet covers off. He would screw into light fixtures. It was our house in Edmond was his room. He'd pull the studs out of the wall, rip off the paint.
Contrary to Paul's claims, relatives and records painted a different picture. Timothy was quiet, gentle, and entirely harmless. In other words, he had no history of aggression, no means to resist, and no voice to defend himself. And the suspects were well aware of his deteriorating condition.
I saw on your phone that you had sent a couple pictures to your mom.
Yes.
Pretty skinny, and you said, hey, he's nothing but skin.
Yeah, I was very concerned.
And then you sent a picture of his legs that were just basically gone, right?
Yeah.
No wonder he can't stand, or something along the lines.
Yeah.
When was the last time he was really talking to you, able to have a conversation, or at least try to have a conversation?
Last time he actually talked was 3 days ago, but the day before, or the day after that, the day before yesterday, he talked a small amount in the morning, but then as my mother was driving me to work, I recommended that maybe we should take him to the hospital.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that ever happened or not.
Paul insisted every step taken was out of care, but the officers weren't convinced. As they dug into Paul and his mother's chat records, more horrifying details surfaced.
What's the deal with the photograph in the bathtub of his face? Like zoomed in on his face.
He'd been taking a bath.
Okay.
And I went in there to check on him at one point, and he was just kind of laying there. I'm like, "Bud, you okay?" He didn't respond, but he was looking around, and he was breathing, I know that much.
Yeah. Clearly where you guys got to. When you say he was in the bath, that wasn't a nice, enjoyable bath, though, right? That was a punishment bath, right? That's a cold, ice-cold bath. Yeah. And that's hard to understand.
I did wash, I did tell him that if he wanted to wash up, and he did, but then in the middle of it, I think the whole laying there in a daze happened.
Cold or ice-filled bathtubs were a form of punishment, and these were not short-term disciplinary actions.
How many times would you estimate that you guys gave cold baths as a punishment for not behaving or whatever, for whatever reason?
I don't exactly know the number, but it wasn't a lot.
Are we talking like 5, 10, 20, every day, every other day? Like any idea?
5.
Yeah. Whose idea was it to give him a cold bath as a punishment?
It was my mother's.
Do you remember the first time you guys did it? Like, why? Like, what did he do?
Not exactly.
What did he do on that day that he sent the photo that made you have to give him a cold bath?
I think it was that he not only peed, but also pooped in bed, and my mother wasn't too happy because it absolutely reeked.
Paul followed his mother's instructions to the T. He even recorded some of these punishments, possibly as proof to Shanda that he was following her cruel commands that seemed to have no end.
When we talk about bed, I understand we've been to the house and we've been through all the messages.
Yeah.
Where did he sleep most of the nights? In that closet?
Yes.
He's been sleeping in the closet?
Yes. We made sure that it was cleaned. He had a mattress in there, but then he decided to rip off the cover, like a sort of plastic cover we put on there to keep it from getting smelly and disgusting.
So you guys decide to move him into the closet. There's an alarm on the door. What's that for?
When he would try and sneak, because if you notice, there was also one on the garage door. That was also because, there's some food in there that he would try and sneak.
Right.
And it wasn't just that he was hungry at some points for those. It was that he wanted something sweet.
Locked in a tiny closet under the basement stairs lined with a blue tarp reeking of urine and feces, Timothy's life was nothing short of hell, and all they could complain about was him asking for something sweet? Sadly, that's not what he got.
Tell me about the hot sauce. I know that was used as both a punishment and it was put on the bread. Was it always on the bread?
Not always, no. But the thing is, it still hardly did anything for him.
Yeah.
There would be times where it would do something for me because I'd accidentally rub my eye after I put it on there. It was ow.
Yeah. So you're putting, what dictates whether or not there's hot sauce on the bread that he's eating? What decides that?
I don't know. Whenever my mother told me to put hot sauce on it, I did.
As punishment for minor offenses like sneaking food, Timothy was tortured with Carolina Reaper hot sauce, one of the world's hottest. It was smeared on his meals to make them inedible, and sometimes cruelly applied directly to his tongue or lips. The torture is unfathomable.
Was he eating this bread with hot sauce, or was he?
Yeah, he was.
Is that really the only things he had to eat those days, or would he get other things to eat?
From the bread and rice, others than that, not that I know of.
Okay. So for how long do you think he just ate rice and bread and hot sauce?
Maybe the 4 months, maybe. Or 1 month, sorry. There would be times where it would take him a moment to respond. At first I thought it was just him acting, but then I was getting concerned. I think a week or so maybe ago.
Okay. His responses are delayed, is that?
Yeah.
Digital messages between Paul and Shanda exposed this calculated cruelty. One read, "If he eats again, sauce him. He needs to learn." Another added, "Use more if he doesn't cry." These weren't spur-of-the-moment reactions. They were cold, deliberate commands meant to inflict pain. Deep down, Paul seemed to recognize his brother's suffering, yet he chose willful ignorance over mercy.
So, I know that when we talked yesterday in front of your mom, she was lying about some stuff, right? I know that she's a good person. I'm not doubting that at all.
Yeah, we never wanted any of this.
But you also noticed, like I know, that some of the things that she was talking to us about weren't the truth, right? She said she didn't know there was a camera in the bathroom. But the fact of the matter, she asked you to put the camera in the bathroom, right? Didn't she send you a text message that says, make sure that the camera's in there and take the shower curtain down so I can see him? Didn't she ask you that the day before he passed away?
Yeah.
So we talked about some of that stuff. Remember how during the conversation I said, I know what this pepper's for. It's for punishment. And what did she say? She said, I didn't know anything about that. Right?
Despite overwhelming evidence, even proof that Shanda tried to shift all blame onto him, Timothy didn't need punishment. He needed compassion, structure, and professional care. Instead, he was met with cruelty and perhaps betrayal at the hands of his own family.
So you have the hot sauce. Tell me about the handcuffs. I know that, once again, she took no blame for that, right? And who did she put it all on? She put it all on you. She said that was your idea and that those were yours and that you did those things. But I think that's not the truth from what I read on here. What's the real truth on that?
We would have him against the wall at some points, and he would try to move. And at one point, we'd actually put motion sensors on him to stop that. But
on him himself?
Yeah, like they were they would sense any sort of vibrations.
Investigators found metal handcuffs, zip ties, and leg shackles, readily available, not hidden. Paul testified Shanda ordered it to keep him from escaping or simply for wandering around.
What about handcuffs or zip ties? What did you guys use those for?
The zip ties were either to fasten the vibrational arms to his belt during the day.
Yeah.
Or to put it on his wrist, not too tight and I would make sure, after the first time we did it, I would make sure to cut off the end of the zip ties because I had them loose. And then he decided to tighten them to where they were nearly cutting off circulation. Normally we have him do this. It was something that I'm not sure if it was my father or my mother back when they were together. But when we were put in timeout, we'd be told to do this. And so sometimes, though, he'd try and do stuff like this, or just try and put his hands down or down by his sides. So we do that to keep them okay.
Paul tried to rationalize the abuse. However, officers noticed fleeting glimpses of guilt in his eyes, quickly buried beneath his desperate attempts to defend his mother's indefensible actions.
Right. So when you first talked to us and you talked to the police, you said he was on his bunk bed, right?
Yeah.
But that's not the truth.
No.
Okay. He was in that closet that's right there by the bunk bed?
Yeah.
Okay. And then your mom had texted you that earlier in the night, or how did you know that he was in there?
I guess at that point it was just something I would already know.
So you know he's not in the bed?
Yes.
So you told us that you heard him snoring. Was that a lie?
Yeah.
And did you come up with that on your own, or did somebody ask you to say that he was in the bed?
I feel so guilty.
You came up with that on your own?
Yeah, because...
So tell me what really happened in the morning then, because obviously what was told to us wasn't the truth. What really happened?
Though hesitant, Paul ultimately admitted he had lied during his initial police interview, revealing not just guilt, but a clear awareness that their actions were wrong, unlawful, and deeply inhumane.
The whole morning thing was exact. He wasn't breathing in the closet. It was the closet, though. We had to get him out of the closet to try and resuscitate.
So it's you and your mother that tried to get him out of the closet?
We did get him out.
Okay. So you guys pull him out of the closet?
And we tried to resuscitate him. We gave him rescue breaths. His breath smelled horrible. I thought maybe he might have still been capable of being resuscitated, but his mouth was still wet.
Yeah.
So I thought maybe it had just been recent, so we could do something. But
Shanda's relentless pressure to discipline Timothy had pushed Paul into an unforgiving brother.
So you guys pull him out. Does he have pants on or no pants on?
None, no.
And when we get there, he has pants on?
Yeah, she had me put them on.
She asked you to put pants on? What
Yeah.
was that for? At that time, she decides that she's going to lie to him and say that he was in the bunk bed? I don't understand.
I don't know.
Clearly
She doesn't want to seem like she's bad, that we weren't neglecting him. And even if if it somehow ended up like that, it was never intentional.
He's right. The abuse wasn't intentional. It was deliberate. The autopsy revealed atrophied muscles, severe dehydration, and internal damage from prolonged starvation and stress. The medical examiner ruled Timothy's a homicide, but Paul would continue to stand by his mom's actions.
If we talk, right, there's all these things where you're like, she didn't want to seem like this. She didn't want to seem like this. She didn't want to seem like this. Did you know that it all seems like that, right?
Yes, I know.
It does. And he clearly was neglected because he died from it, right? The reality is that he was. That's why we're here talking today. So he was very much neglected. And the fact that, she had asked you to put hot sauce on his private parts.
She asked, but I never did.
You never did that?
No.
Okay.
Using hot sauce as torture, especially on a child, is punishable under felony child abuse or torture statutes, carrying up to life imprisonment depending on the state and severity of harm caused.
And she had asked you to put hot sauce directly into his mouth. Did you do that?
Yes.
Is that on the 5th, the day kind of leading up to all this stuff?
Yeah.
How much hot sauce did you put in there?
Dad?
And whose idea was that to put that hot sauce in there?
Hers.
And what was the purpose of that?
Again, she thought the whole unresponsive was an act.
She thought it was an act, which clearly, very clearly it wasn't. Right?
Yeah.
Although Paul initially denied applying hot sauce to Timothy's private parts, he later admitted in court that, under Shanda's pressure, he had done it once, further exposing the disturbing extent of control she held over him.
Can I ask you this, like straight up? You keep saying love, love. Do you feel like this was love? That he's dead now because he couldn't eat food. Does that feel like love to you?
No.
He's dead because he couldn't eat.
No.
And I don't know anybody that thinks that's love. What I think's happening is your mom's convinced you that she's this perfect person, and she's asking you to do all these things that are literally killing your brother.
I know she's not perfect.
How is that love? How is love? How is love ice baths? How is love? How is love handcuffing? And how is love restricting movement?
During investigation, hundreds of recovered messages exposed her chilling mindset. He needs to suffer. Put him back in the closet until he learns. Don't feed him anything but hot sauce. These weren't the words of a mother. They were orders of torment from someone determined to break him.
Do you know, can I ask you this? Do you know of any good people who starved a child to death? Tell me of one that you know. Tell me of one that you know. That's a child who has a lot of problems, right? That's not a child that's taking care of themselves. They can't take care of themselves because you guys are restricting where he can go and what he can do. And if he does something wrong, you're punishing him by giving him ice baths and hot sauce and only feeding him bread. How is that? How is that a loving person? How is that a loving mother? You know what that sounds like to me? And honestly, the worst mother I've ever met in my entire life is what it sounds like to me.
I know. But she's not.
The officer had lost all patience, and Paul had run out of excuses. The truth stood, raw and undeniable.
Maybe she wasn't to you. Maybe she was a good mother to you. And maybe she wasn't to Gabriel. Sounds like she's a very good mother to Gabriel. But to one of the three children, she didn't care. You can say it if you want. She starved him to death because he wouldn't stop taking food. Well, maybe he's taking food because he wants to live. Have you ever thought about that?
Yes.
Maybe he's stealing food so that he can survive. He's dead because he didn't get food.
Shanda didn't just torture Timothy herself, she weaponized Paul through endless commands. Over time, the pressure twisted into resentment and desensitization, pushing Paul to the brink of becoming completely emotionless.
Do you think that message is just a little bit suspicious? That she sends you at just about midnight that says, he's in the closet, I had to drag him in there. You don't think he was already dying or dead at that point?
I was working. I didn't read that message until basically I'd gotten home.
But do you think she sent that for a reason? Why would she send that?
I don't know.
Doesn't it seem like maybe he was already dead? That she put him in there so that he could wake up and have time to sleep? Because she can't call the police when he's in an ice bath and he freezes and he dies. Not freezes per se, but he dies in the bath. And she dragged him in there. Did she talk to you about that? Did she tell you the truth about what really happened?
I don't know at this point.
She did, right? I don't know. I don't want you to lie to me anymore.
No, I don't know if he died in there. I don't know where. I remember. I know that when I got up, he was gone.
Both Shanda and Paul Ferguson were found to have violated multiple Michigan state and federal criminal laws, including neglect of a vulnerable child, failure to provide medical care, unlawful imprisonment, torture, first-degree child abuse, and ultimately, felony. But was there any remorse? Sadly, none.
But how do you feel about over and over and over again defending your mother about how good she is? Do you feel like that's the truth anymore? Because I'm quite disgusted by her. I'm disgusted by her.
She never wanted this.
Then how smart is your mother?
She's incredibly intelligent. Magna cum laude.
Right. Have you ever thought about that? Have you ever thought, how can a woman that's this smart, this intelligent, graduate from law school, how could she not know what's happening? How could she think this is fake? How does she not know she's starving? How does she not see that he's wasting away? And you here, you're telling me that you've got some mental health issues, but you graduated from high school, and it's very obvious to you that he's got malnutrition, right? It's very obvious to you, but your mom here's not seeing that?
At this point, the interrogation was focused more on showing Paul the true side of his evil mother than making him realize his own transgressions.
She's a liar. She's lied to you about so much stuff. At some point, you need to stand up for yourself and realize she's the manipulator, she's the liar, she put you in this spot, she did this to your brother, using you. Do you not see that? That she used you to do this to your brother. Your mother used you. She's so smart. She's smarter than any of us here. She's smarter than me. She's smarter than any detective here. She's smarter than our chief of police here. She's smarter than all of us. And we're supposed to believe she didn't know what was happening? No. She didn't want him around anymore because he was too much of a problem.
In the end, Paul Ferguson, Timothy's older brother, who was 21 at the time, pled guilty to first-degree child abuse. The felony charge was dismissed as part of a plea deal in which he agreed to testify against his mother, Shanda Vander Ark. In return, he avoided a conviction, but was sentenced to 30 to 100 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Despite his cooperation, the judge made it clear that Paul was considered equally or more culpable in Timothy's death, highlighting the severity of his role in the abuse. But the final sentencing left the courtroom in stunned silence, with many overcome by emotion as the judge delivered powerful closing words. This wasn't about losing control, it was about maintaining it through calculated, unrelenting pain. Timothy wasn't neglected by accident, he was targeted on purpose.
And what I realized is that I wanted to feel that way because I didn't want to accept the reality of the situation here. And the reality of the situation here is that this person, Ms. Vander Ark, you intentionally engaged in these acts. This wasn't negligence. This is not understanding why, but you intentionally did this with a goal. And I think Mr. Johnson's correct. I don't believe there was an intent to kill here, because you would have lost the very thing that you wanted to torture. Without him, you have no one to torture, except maybe the younger children. So I don't believe you intended to kill him. I think you intended to continue on torturing him for as long as you possibly could. The why, I don't know. But all the information that I have in front of me, and I sat down, I really thought about this, and I looked over my notes from the trial, demonstrate that this wasn't negligence. This wasn't you not understanding what was going on. You look through, I read through every single text message of the exhibit 2,000 plus pages to try to understand what the heck was going through your mind. And what became entirely clear to me is that you knew exactly what you were doing.
The judge didn't just read facts, he relived the horror. Every message, every detail revealed a mother who wasn't confused but cruel. Shanda knew exactly what she was doing, and she chose to keep doing it over and over until it was too late.
Immediately afterwards, when police arrive at the home, you immediately concoct this lie about he's been on a hunger strike. He was in the bed and I checked on him and I gave him some food and all this stuff. You got Paul involved in it. At one point in time, put baggy clothes on him. Put clothes on him to make sure, I guess, that he looks like he was actually wearing them, that he was hiding his poor condition, even though you already received text messages, weeks earlier of how bad he looked.
Even as Timothy's body was shutting down, she plotted a cover-up. But no amount of fabric could hide the truth. Timothy's suffering was visible in every bone and bruise.
All the things you did, I looked through every one of the messages: bread with hot sauce, wall sits, up and down the stairs, sleep deprivation, ice baths, making him puke up food, monitoring his bathroom time, giving him 60 seconds in the bathroom if he went to urinated, or 5 minutes if he had a bowel movement. You made him sleep in the closet. You threatened us to make him sleep in the garage. You put Tabasco directly in his mouth. You made him put his hands over the head. Made him work in the garage with no pants.
It wasn't discipline. It wasn't parenting. It was torture, relentless, inescapable, and methodical. From ice baths to sleep deprivation to being timed on bathroom breaks like a prisoner, Timothy's daily life was designed to break him. And yet he held on until he couldn't anymore.
And there's two other things that didn't come out in the trial that were in the messages. One, that there was talk of blindfolding him, depriving him of his physical sight as a punishment. And the last thing that struck me is just absolutely horrific in terms of your thinking. There was mentioning of giving him salt water as a punishment. One of the text messages talks about, hey, tell Paul or tell Tim that I'm not going to do the saltwater punishment. And your reasoning for not punishing him was that, oh my God, we can't get him salt water, that could hurt him, that could kill him. But it was because you didn't want to give him another excuse to sit down on the toilet because he'd have diarrhea.
But what made it worse was the reasoning. Not fear of hurting him, but fear he might need too long in the bathroom. Her cruelty had no end. Only limits of inconvenience.
I didn't allow pictures to be shown in open court of Timothy as he was when he died, because I didn't want people to remember him like that. Of all the things you took away from him, one thing I didn't want you to take away from him was at least some shred of dignity. I am choosing not to remember your son looking like a Holocaust victim, but I'm choosing to remember like that. And you can't even look at him. That's how he was. A beautiful child with a lot of life in his eyes. That's who your son was. And you took that from him.
Timothy was denied so much in life, but in the judge gave him one final mercy: dignity. He refused to let the world remember him as a broken shell, because beneath the pain, there once lived a bright, beautiful child whose light was stolen.
You look like that when you put him in the bathtub?
His condition was so horrifying that when a photo of his emaciated body was shown in court, his mother, Shanda Vander Ark, vomited on the spot, unable to face what she had done.
I'm not going to let you hide in the darkness anymore. People know what you are now. They know what you did. You're not able to hide in the darkness anymore. Timothy won. And he won because we know what you did to him now. It's not hidden anymore. We know who you are. That's the way that I'm going to honor him. You don't win, because justice thank God in this case prevailed. I can't even imagine if you had been able to resuscitate him. He'd be still suffering. So if there's anything I'm grateful for, would be that he finally passed away so you couldn't continue to torture him like you did.
Shanda Vander Ark, Timothy's mother, was convicted of first-degree and first-degree child abuse. She received a mandatory life sentence without the possibility of parole for the murder, along with 50 to 100 years for child abuse to be served concurrently.